league. She's working with Amber Cargill, our director of wellness. We've made sure that all of the teams who have full-time wellness people, that they are being supplemented by any resources that we can provide. If a team does not have a full-time wellness person or does not have full-time resources, we've been supplementing that, and that's something we've done, and I think has worked real well between us and the league.
Gotcha. And then for JC, the Bills were back on the practice field today. As a former player, what kind of challenge do you think it is for these guys to have Damar's thoughts in one compartment, but getting ready to play a game on Sunday in another compartment?
Yeah, definitely not easy. Again, this is something that I think hit everybody very hard, hit everybody's families very hard as well. I think that's what Dee was just answering. We've talked about having resources available for people to talk about it. I think what we've seen is also been very encouraging is the brotherhood, and I think teams and locker rooms and former players and between locker rooms have rallied together to be there, to be a shoulder, to be strength in numbers. So it is definitely not easy. Obviously, we're getting good news, which I think is probably very helpful to that locker room and all the locker rooms. So that's positive, but definitely not easy.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ryan. George Radney.
Good afternoon. George Radney, Challenger Community Newspaper, Buffalo, New York, Rochester, New York area. Just two quick questions. One question, Dr. Mayer, I believe I was reading the article the same night that this happened, because I remember that as a young kid back in 1971, Chuck Hughes was hit by Dick Butkus in Tiger State, in the old Tiger Stadium. And in the article, it said he had a cardiac arrest, and it sounded similar to what Damar Hamlin seemed to have suffered on Monday night. And unfortunately, he did not make it, Mr. Chuck Hughes. So I believe this has happened before on the football field, cardiac arrest.
Yeah,
situation.
It's a good question. It's hard to believe that there was anything before my time, but that was actually considerable.
My time too. Now, hold on now.
Yeah, no, understood. But I'm aware of that case. Even as at that time, I was a college football player. I certainly was aware of it, and a Bears fan as well. I eventually tried out with the Bears, but that's ancient history. But no one ever looked into it in any detail. The problem was, and I went back into one as far as we could, and what we knew is that he had a significant cardiac blockage in one of his main coronary arteries, and that it probably did not have anything to do with the trauma. It was probably a cardiac arrest from a myocardial infarction. But there's not a whole lot of what is known is that he had a significant blockage in an artery that could have caused that. But I didn't see any autopsy report other than that. Nothing about did he have blood in the pericardium? Did he have anything else? So again, because commotio cordis is a diagnosis by exclusion, the fact that he had evidence of a myocardial infarction, you'd say, well, it was myocardial infarction and not it would be hit in all likelihood. Does that make sense?
It does somewhat make sense. Because was there any footage? Because I remember we didn't hear about it. It was in the local newspaper like 4 days later. The game's on Sunday, and it was in the paper. You just saw a picture of the guy on the field with Dick Buckus looking over him. Was there any footage that you know of that actually saw what happened?
Let me jump in. Yeah, let me jump in. I actually, starting Wednesday, looked for that. I'm sure there's footage, probably reel-to-reel footage somewhere. I mean, he actually was not hit by Dick Butkus. He collapsed near Dick Butkus. The photo is of Dick Butkus looking down on him, but it wasn't the result of contact. Doc's right. Later, they found that he had a nearly 75% blockage in his artery when he collapsed to the ground. So, no, it's not similar, right?
Okay, one quick question for yourself, Mr. Smith. Damar Smith. My question is, with the new money coming, all these three new revenue streams that have been coming in to the owners since the players signed that agreement. Now the NFL ticket is going for now with the Apple and with the YouTube and all of that, and with two other revenue streams. The new TV contract, I think, came after that, and something else. Is there any updating where the players now will still be able to reap the benefits of these new revenue streams that the owners have acquired since the contract was signed?
Yeah, the revenue streams aren't new. I mean, they're new deals, but media and the way that we define media under the collective bargaining agreement is, just to make it clear, we grab revenue from all sources. That's number one. We're always obviously happy when those revenue numbers come up, and we will receive our percentage share like we always have.
All right. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Both of you gentlemen. Thank you both.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks, George. Dan Graziano.
I'm curious what kind of feedback you guys are getting from players, I guess specifically on the Bills and the Bengals, but all around the league in terms of any feelings guys have, concerns guys have about playing again, this weekend.
JC, I mean, that's probably...
Yeah, we've obviously been hosting calls the last couple of days. We had an executive committee call. We had a board of reps call. We had calls available for the Bills and the Bengals individually, and then an all-player call last night. So we've wanted to make ourselves extremely available, and also not just us. I think they know that they can get in touch with us to discuss their feelings, but also making sure they know we can put them in touch with people to help them through difficult times. So we haven't got a ton of comments about not feeling like they're able to play. Again, I think we're obviously getting some very positive news, in just the last hours. So I think we haven't talked to people since then. I think it probably will continue to shift throughout the week, and we're hoping we're continuing to get good news, continuing to get progress. And then also we're continuing to put resources into buildings, into team facilities that will help players through, as well as what we've made clear. Our phones are always on for players' families as well. And this is not just an issue where players have to get through some things. Definitely hits the families hard too. Understanding that, sometimes it's easy to forget just how dangerous the sport is. So I think this is a moment where everybody got a little experience, very scary experience with how dangerous the game of football can be. And we want to make sure we have the resources and the professionals available to help people talk through and deal with those emotions.
And Dan, one thing I would say to follow up is, and you've heard probably iterations of this over the last 14 years. Our men are not gladiators. That's something that I hate that word when it comes out of reporters' mouths. I hate that word when it comes out of fans' mouths. I hate that word when it even sometimes comes out of our players' mouths, because it assumes that you are somehow less of a human than everybody else. And while this is tragic, I hope that this sends a message that people are aware of the humanity of this game. And yes, it's dangerous, and yes, it's scary. Yes, it's entertainment. But my hope is that people understand and appreciate just the sheer humanity of this game.
Thanks, Dan. Jenny Vrentis.
Hi. I wanted to follow up on the first question that was asked about the conversations that took place on Monday night. Troy Vincent said on Monday night that it never crossed their mind to talk about was warming up to resume play, that was never something that was considered. I wanted to see what your recollection of Monday night was. I think D and also JC, was resuming play ever something that was discussed, either in your conversation with Roger, D, or at any other point that night?
Not for me, no. Once I was aware of the severity of it, it was just a question of, when and the necessity of ending this game. I never heard from a player that I talked to who wanted to go back out on the field. I mean, JC.
Yeah, again, I mean, I was in touch with the players in the locker rooms and the executive committee. They were adamant that they shouldn't go back on the field, and they weren't in a state of mind to go back on the field. And again, that was just the executive committee. When that happened, every person said, I wouldn't be able to continue doing this if I was out there right now. So we made our stance known immediately before even talking to the two teams. And then once we were able to get in touch with the two locker rooms, they echoed what we all believed as an executive committee, that the players are not capable of. So those are the communications I was having. I did not talk to Troy personally, though, so I don't know what was going through his head.
Yeah, just to clarify, was there any indication coming from the NFL side that they wanted to resume the game, that they were interested in potentially resuming on Monday night?
I can only tell you, and I make a habit of not really revealing conversations I have with Roger. I spent more of my time focusing on what I believed was the right call. And it seemed to me that at that moment, when we knew the severity of the injury, I'll be frank with you, I don't think it should be a player's call. I don't think it should be a coach's call. I think given the severity of the injury and what the players witnessed, that it needed to be a call, that the NFL needed to make to not play this game. And I understand. I understand sort of the idea that we'd want to know and we want to have feedback and we want to have input. But I do think that there are certain times when it should be beyond the call of the people who are involved and there. I think that sometimes it should just be the decision that it's best for everybody that the game should be canceled, and I make that clear.
JC, anything to add? Or
yeah, I mean, I would say I think for most people watching at home, and for, again, the executive committee, our staff, the players on the field, the coaches on the field, it was a clear no, and everybody knew it was a clear no. It sounds like there was a lot of checking to see what everybody's opinion was. Moments like that are time for leadership, time to step up and make the right decision. And I think sometimes when you spend a lot of time asking for everybody's answer, you're asking for, or you're looking for a specific answer, because when the obvious answer, you don't pull the trigger on it. That's why it probably took an hour, is my opinion.
Thanks, Jenny. Rob, how are you? Thanks for joining. You're up.
Thank you. Hi, guys. This is for JC. How much input do you have with the league in the discussions about potentially adding an 8th playoff team, if at all? Are you involved in those conversations?
An 8th playoff team would mean extra work for the players. The union bargains for wages, hours, and working conditions. That would increase the hours of the 8th team. It would be necessary condition of bargaining. That makes sense?
It does. Is that something then that you're open to, that possibility?
I never talk about hypotheticals. Nobody's presented a proposal to the union. And I don't necessarily, no, okay, sometimes we do bargain in the press. But today, I'm not going to bargain in the press.
Thank you.
Josina, how are you? You're up.
Hi, George. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year.
Hey.
So first thing I just wanted to clarify, especially with Dr. Mayer, did you definitively hear that myocarditis was not a contributing factor? And 2, considering that Damar Hamlin is a 24-year-old, outside of a blockage in the artery or anything other than that, Is there any sort of unique condition that you think could be a contributing factor, particularly for someone in his age range? And then lastly, especially with what you were talking about with commotio cordis, do you think that there is an extension of the equipment that can or should happen that potentially could absorb a blow that wouldn't cause some sort of arrhythmia or catching it at the right time when there's an uptick, as you were describing before, that would cause such a unique circumstance of events?
Thank you, Josina. A couple in the order you raised them, I hope, and remind me if I don't get to them all. He has no evidence of myocarditis so far. A player in a situation like that, so I'm stepping away from the individual player, would get conduction studies through a catheterization that look specifically at are there accessory pathways that put him at risk. There's no reason to think so, in the sense he's had numerous EKGs in the past, and none of those showed any evidence of that. But it would be typical to go ahead and do a conduction study to make sure that he doesn't have an abnormality in that regard. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, the second question was just that, is there any sort of unique condition, other than what you guys mentioned, that could be a contributing factor? Because you guys said that examinations will continue for underlying factors that I know you're not, specifically there right now, but in terms of things that you might be looking for that could be a part of that web.
Yeah, and the answer is thank you. The answer is everything is under consideration from, and again, I'm talking about patients in general with this, and I'll come to your equipment issue as well. But everything is looked at, from the conduction system to potential for myocarditis to the potential for an apical hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Again, none of that has been ever shown up on an X-ray or any of the current studies, but that's why I say that commotio is a diagnosis by exclusion. It typically occurs, it doesn't occur often, but it does occur in youth football. And it's also most common in hockey players, in lacrosse players. A personal friend of our family, George Boyardi, played first at Landon High School, but at Cornell, and was hit with a crossball in the chest and suffered what was clearly a commotio cordis. Unfortunately, he was not an NFL player and wasn't protected by an emergency action plan, and did not have 3 highly trained emergency physicians on the sideline, although Cornell has excellent facilities. So there's a lot of literature looking at, could breastplates, could Kevlar plates, could the extension of shoulder pads, could a number of different things to protect the blow, protect from commotio. And nothing has been fruitful so far, but technology changes all the time. I'll stress what Dr. Hines said, which is this has to occur at a 20 millisecond, that's 20 thousandths of a second. That's the only interval in which you can create commotio, which then leads to ventricular fibrillation. And there have been numerous studies that have tried to replicate force, firing various forms of projectiles and all those kinds of things, not at humans, of course. But you can't reproduce it. If I put a stopwatch in your hand and said, stop, very few of you have reaction times that would allow you to stop and start and have a millisecond interval. So that's what I mean by it's extraordinarily rare. And we're constantly in contact with the Dr. Doug Casa at the Corey Stringer Institute. And you can't make this up, but I started on August 1st, 2001, the day that Corey Stringer died, and got a call saying, you need to become our medical director. But he's a close medical advisor for us on hyper and hypothermia, on sudden cardiac death of any type. And he and I have had extensive conversations specifically about this and what's the future of how we deal with this. Just very fortunate that it's so rare.
Thanks, Doc. Thanks, Josina.
Thank you.
And gonna end right on time with Ben Strauss. Thanks, Ben, for joining us. You're up.
Hey guys, thanks. I know you guys have been asked, and I don't mean to sort of questions anymore. But just to be clear, I guess I think like what we've heard is sort of when in that timeline of playing or not playing that I guess I've heard, and just so I'm hearing you right, that you guys are contradicting what Troy Vincent said in that the league never considered playing. Like if they're asking, like, do you guys want to play? That is a consideration of playing. And in those, a fair reading of
Ben, you're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, Brent.
Yeah.
I think I heard the question. I think I heard enough of it to answer. I heard bits and pieces of what Troy said, yesterday. All I can tell you, and I'll let JC follow up, is I never heard from a player that was interested in playing football on Monday night. I know that when Troy does, he's as close to the, acting commissioner when he's giving those press conferences. I know he's speaking from the heart. But there was never a time that I heard from a player who thought it was a good idea to go back out on the field Monday night. JC had far more communications, and he was aware of communications between the players themselves. And I can weigh in as well.
Yeah, I know we've obviously talked about this quite a bit. The players had no interest in playing. The coaches had no interest in coaching. I think every former player watching that game knew they would be unable to play. And like I said earlier, in times where a leader needs to make a decision, when you take a bunch of time to ask everybody else what their opinion would be, it seems more like you're searching for the answer you want and not what the right answer actually is. So we made the determination it wouldn't be smart to continue playing. The moment we saw what happened and how scary that was, again, it as we all know, it took a long time for that to actually go into effect.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate everyone's time. We will make a recording and transcript available to you as soon as it is ready. DJC and the two docs, we appreciate you very much for being available and for everybody to join. Thank you for being a part of it. Happy New Year. And best news is Damar's improving. So it's great stuff. Great note to end on.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.